Okay guys, today's video is going to be about walking and working surfaces. This is the OSHA standard for walking and working surfaces. You can see on the left of the screen I have the quiz here. I want you to see it in advance. I also attached it to the text in the Remind app. So if you guys want to have this printed out and going through it while I'm going through the presentation, it's probably the easiest way to do this. And you're going to see in the first couple of slides, I think we're going to get three questions right out of the way. So real quick, we're going to talk about slips, trips, and falls, the general housekeeping standard. We'll be dealing with floor openings and wall openings. When do they need to be guarded? When do they not? Can you exceed floor load ratings? What are the dimensions of a standard hand railing? And we'll also talk about toe boards. When are they necessary? Dealing with stairs. When do you have to have a handrail? When is it not necessary? Where do these standards apply? Is it all work settings? If we're working on platforms, how high off the floor before you need a railing? And we're going to talk about working in aisles where you're using mechanical equipment. Do you have to mark it? Do you not? That idea. So, again, if you want to have this out while I'm going through the slideshow, probably not a bad idea. Here we go, walking working surfaces. Basically, this is going to be any kind of surface that you would stand on to perform your job, not just floors. Ladders, stairs, mezzanines, decks, towers, whatever you're standing on to work. Okay. Slips, trips, and falls. That's what we're trying to avoid. It's the biggest thing we're trying to mitigate. If you guys haven't heard that term before, mitigate means to reduce or to get rid of. So you'll hear that in the OSHA world a lot. We want to mitigate slips, trips, and falls. They are the majority of the general industry accidents, and I think that is question number one. Okay, it's one of the biggest issues out there. This standard applies for any walking and working surface in all permanent places of employment. So permanent places of employment. There are some exceptions. I'll work backwards on this list. Agricultural work. If you're working on a farm, it's pretty hard to make the fields and the barns, to meet a particular standard. So this doesn't cover agricultural settings. Mining. Remember, the mining industry has their own standards. They don't fall under OSHA. And then domestic. So a domestic work setting could be if you're a home health care worker and you go to somebody's house to perform your job. OSHA certainly can't force a homeowner to make their house meet particular standards. So this standard doesn't apply to domestic, mining, or agricultural settings. There is a general housekeeping rule. We talked about this in the intro to OSHA a couple trainings ago. Basically, the workplace has to be kept as neat, clean, and orderly as possible. And especially floors and these walking working surfaces, you've got to keep them clean. This picture happens to be of a guy working in a sawmill. Generates a lot of sawdust. It doesn't mean they have to clean it up every 2 minutes, but there is going to be some sort of a limit where they have to stop and get it cleaned up when it starts to pose a hazard. Okay, so that's the general housekeeping requirement. Anytime you're working in like warehouses where you have permanent aisles or passageways where equipment's going to be moving, they have to permanently mark the floors. And you'll see that in a lot of warehouses. All of the aisles are actually lined. That's so that they don't put anything in the way. Okay, permanently marking and denoting where these aisles are. And they've got to be kept clear from any obstructions. So we're going to start moving into holes and openings in floors as well as walls. So this is a picture of a pit. These were really popular years ago. They could drive a car over this. Somebody could be down in the pit and then work on the bottom side of the car. It's before the day of auto lifts. The problem is it's an opening in a floor, and if there isn't a vehicle over it, somebody could fall into it. So any sort of an opening has to either be covered or guarded. Okay, and there's different ways that we can do that. When you're dealing with floor loads, every floor is engineered to handle a certain amount of weight, and that has to be posted with the rating. So the sign on this picture, you guys should recognize that we have one over the bathroom and one over my office in the classroom, and they're all throughout the school. Wherever there is a storage area or work area above another work area where people are going to be, they have to post that with a load rating. Okay, so this particular one is 100 pounds per square foot. I think the one over our bathroom is only 40. You can't exceed the load rating limit, period. Not by 1%, not by 10%. Okay. So here's another example of a floor opening. Basically anything that's bigger than 12 inches is considered a floor opening. You've got to guard them. Typically, you're going to be using a standard railing. A standard railing is going to have three components to it. A top rail, which is 42 inches from the floor. A mid rail, mid means middle, so 21 inches from the floor. And in most cases, there will be a toe board. The standard toe board is 4 inches high. It doesn't have to rest on the floor, but it can't have any more than a 1/4 inch gap between it and the floor. And the toe board is basically to keep things from rolling off the edge and falling down onto somebody that might be moving below. Okay, so if there's ever going to be anybody working below a floor where there is an opening, there has to be a toe board around it. Whether it's people or machinery moving around, you have to protect from things rolling over the edge and falling down. I think we've covered more than half the quiz already. So here's another example. This particular stairway, they even have a gate at the opening to the stairs, so somebody wouldn't mistakenly fall down. Ladderways, same idea. A ladderway or a fixed ladder is going to be perfectly vertical. So typically a grate is, in this case, is pulled out of the floor so they can access the ladder. Once the opening is there, they have to somehow guard it. Typically with railings, it could be gates, it could be barriers. A floor hole is less than 12 inches. Don't worry about the differences between the two. Just know that whenever you've got a hole that something can fall down through, somehow has to be guarded. Typically floor holes, they'll cover it. And the cover has to be the same strength or handle the same load as the floor. So wall openings. A wall opening, don't worry about the dimensions here, but basically if you would fall more than 4 feet from the lower edge of the opening, it has to be guarded. And typically it will be done with railings, the standard railings. Top rail at 42 inches, mid rail at 21, and in the case of this picture, if it goes all the way down to the floor, there's going to be a toe board. And those are actually 3 elevator shafts. So who knows how tall this building is? Could be 10 stories. Imagine not having that guarded and somebody ends up going over the edge. They got a 10-story fall down to the pit below. Here's an example of an open-sided floor platform or a catwalk. Same idea, has to be guarded, okay? And I'll let you guys know if it's 4 feet or more above the floor, you have to have handrails. Now click through this one. So stairs, stairways, there are 2 major components. You have treads, that's what your feet rest on. If I get my little mouse over here. And then the distance between the treads is the riser. So when you have 4 or more risers, so at this point from here up, you'd have to have a railing. In other words, if the platform was below that step that I just showed you, so 1 riser, 2, 3, 4 risers. If the platform was here, you'd have to have handrails. If the platform was here, you wouldn't have to have handrails. So 4 or more risers. Now you have to have handrails. Hopefully I didn't muddy the waters on that one. I can skip this one. And with ladders, I'm not going to worry about covering that in this presentation. We're actually going to do a separate training on ladders, and that one you guys will probably get to see me demoing it. But just know that ladders, both portable and fixed, do fall under the walking working surface standards. It's also good to know that the general industry rules and the construction rules or standards, there are some differences there. They allow for a few more things in the construction standards. Okay, so I know that seemed to end it abruptly, but you got everything you needed. So that ends walking working surfaces. Again, you got the quiz right there. Remember, slips, trips, and falls are the major cause of accidents or injuries in general industry. Keep the place as neat and clean as possible, your general housekeeping standard. You've got to have toe boards if anybody's going to be working below a platform. You can't exceed floor load ratings. You have to use standard railings. It is one of the ways to guard floor openings or holes. Remember, 4 or more risers on stairs, you have to have a handrail. You've got to have standard railings if you're working on a platform above 4 feet or 4 feet above the floor. You've got to mark aisles whenever you're using equipment in them, and they're permanent. And I think that pretty much covers it. Again, if you guys have any questions, just shoot me a question on Remind, and I'll try to answer it as soon as I can. Have a good one.